If you want to support the channel, please consider becoming a member today. Members get early access to videos, access to all the stream VODs, and exclusive access to emotes as well. So if you'd like to support the channel, become a member today.
But as it happens, I do have experience. I've already shared several times my own personal struggles with getting through public school as a kid with this disorder. I was never diagnosed with the disorder officially because that was not a direction that my parents were going to go. They were not looking to medicalize my academic problems.
Oh my gosh, this is so sad. I am willing to bet, and I think we're going to find out soon, that Matt is afraid of this thing because he doesn't like that it's technically a condition, that it's technically a mental illness. He doesn't like that. And honestly, in a way, I feel bad for him. I especially feel bad for him because I lived my whole life with ADHD, and I know that my entire teen years were miserable, at least partially, because I had ADHD. So I thought for a little bit today I would talk about ADHD because, well, I have it. And Matt Walsh talked about it and said, of course, some of the most asinine things about this that I have ever heard. It is insane. But the first thing I'll say is learning about having ADHD, especially as an adult. Like, I knew I had it when I was a teenager. I think I was diagnosed 16 or 17 maybe. But I never really went on meds. I didn't take it seriously. I didn't really understand what it was or how it was affecting me or anything like that. At that time, I just kind of, whatever, it just didn't really mean anything to me. It wasn't until later, when I got older, that I started to really realize the effects that it was having on me, especially with like emotional dysregulation. For a while, I was so confused. I was like, do I have bipolar? That can't be right because my mood would go too up and down throughout the day to be bipolar. And it wasn't until like only a couple years ago that I realized, wait, ADHD can cause like emotional dysregulation also? I didn't even know that. So a lot of what ADHD is, I think is missed. People don't know what it is. And Matt Walsh is a really good example of that.
Boys are twice as likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. Why boys are more susceptible to this mysterious mental illness or disorder. We never stop to consider that perhaps we are not so much diagnosing boys as we are diagnosing boyhood. Back in old agrarian societies, they didn't have ADHD. Didn't exist. Why is that? Well, because it wasn't a problem for a boy back then to have lots of physical energy. In fact, it was necessary. Now it's a problem because we want him to sit still for the first 18 years of his life.
So this, of course, is what happens when you have no clue what you're talking about, and then are given millions of dollars from a network and a microphone in front of thousands of people. Trust me, okay, having ADHD, it's not having lots of energy. If that were ADHD, that would be pretty nice, man. This is like the generic grandpa understanding of ADHD. It's like, it's when you can't sit still in school. And then he tries to signal to this conspiracy, I guess. Boys are twice as likely. That's because boys tend to show a lot more external symptoms of ADHD than girls do. That's why a lot of girls, it goes missed in girls. Sometimes adult women don't even realize they have it until later on because growing up, they were only ever taught that that's what this was. You can't sit still. When in reality, it's a whole malfunction of how your brain is working, essentially, because of a dopamine deficiency. So if you find yourself being like really scatterbrained and unable to keep track of the time and you can't focus for some reason, maybe sometimes you can't sit still, sure, but there's a lot of other ways that ADHD affects you. And then the big thing for me that I realized was how that hyperactivity part of ADHD, like what Matt Walsh is talking about, the I can't sit still thing, I never had much of that, and I certainly don't have that as an adult, so I was always kind of confused by that too. But it wasn't until I was reading something that I learned how sometimes that hyperactivity can go inward. And then that made a lot of sense to me because I don't have a lot of external, like, can't sit still, but internally I feel so restless all the time if I'm unmedicated for a long period of time or something. Thankfully, I have that a little more under control now. But ADHD definitely can also affect motivation too. And something that was really helpful for me to learn was how, because an ADHD brain has a dopamine deficiency, that means that by default, your brain tends to prioritize what it finds to be stimulating rather than what is productive or the most important thing to do for the day. It doesn't matter how important that thing is. If it doesn't give you stimulus, you tend to not want to do it. And I know that was my experience a lot growing up too. And that's another thing too. Like, I don't think people always realize that sometimes ADHD shows up as just finding everything boring. When you're looking around, you're like, why is everyone else having fun? And they're able to enjoy this and engage with people and everything. But why is this so boring for me? Why? And when you realize that it's like, because of the dopamine deficiency, that's a lot of the times why you'll get like hyper fixated on some things. Especially, what are they? They're always things that you find to be the most enjoyable, right? Like whether they're a video game or whether it's just a hobby. I know even for me that's happened before, where like I should be streaming and I still really enjoy streaming, but sometimes I'll just get distracted by other things that I also find really enjoyable. And when that happens, now I'm able to kind of catch myself a little more because I also take medicine, but it was a uphill battle for a long time. As somebody with ADHD, it's true also that being bored feels worse because of the neurodivergence in general. People with ADHD do tend to feel things more strongly, whether it's just a whole array of emotions, really. Like it can be anger, frustration, like feeling frustrated really quick, but then also boredom. Yeah, boredom is like painful. And people also talk a lot about like, is it being overdiagnosed? And that's kind of debatable right now as to whether or not ADHD is being overdiagnosed. Sometimes it's misdiagnosed because it has a lot of overlapping symptoms and comorbidities as well. So sometimes people with autism might be diagnosed with ADHD or vice versa. I think, I could be wrong on that. But there are certainly comorbidities that can affect diagnosis. And there's also something about how they changed the criteria. The diagnosis criteria was updated. I think it was back in 2014 maybe, with the DSM-5, I believe. They updated the criteria to exhibiting symptoms of, or they changed it with that provided a little bit more leeway. So it provided an avenue for more people to seek potentially getting diagnosed if they did have the condition. It also took out that you needed to exhibit symptoms in childhood. It may have changed the cutoff time, actually. So it changed things in that regard, too, which allowed for people to get diagnosed more because a lot of adults have it, too, and some of them just don't even know. I just got told you were watching my video, saw ADHD, didn't know if you got to the part where I talk about Matt's ADHD. I didn't know you talk about that, but I'm definitely going to talk about that.
Things like anger, things like not being what others want you to be all the time. These are both aspects I've personally shared with Matt. And you know what else I've shared with Matt? I'm ADHD. Like defending introversion, Matt has time and time again returned to the well of criticizing ADHD. In his own words, he basically admits to having it and has attested as much in both multiple videos and blog posts, like this 2015 Blaze blog post. Quote, I'm very familiar with the symptoms. I've had them.
Oh my gosh, great find, Dead Domain. Excellent. What the hell? I can't believe it. So Matt does just flat out deny ADHD.
My whole life. Even now, I daydream all the time. I can't sit still. I can't concentrate on mundane tasks. I get lost in my own head. I forget things. I can't stay on one train of thought for very long. At this very moment, I have 4 different Word documents open on my computer and I'm working on 4 different posts at the same time. 3 of them will never be published or completed. Ask my wife, she'll tell you all about it. Ask my high school...
That is... Wait, so he's saying he has ADHD, but he doesn't have ADHD? What? Or it's not real? He's literally listing out all of the ADHD symptoms in the way that it's negatively impacting his career and how even his wife can attest to it? What?
School chemistry teacher who failed me once, made me repeat the class, then finally gave me an unearned passing grade the following year because he didn't want to deal with me again. Ask anyone who knows me. I have all of the, quote, symptoms, but I don't have a disorder because there is no disorder. There might be people with legitimate disorders who get labeled with this one, but this specific thing we refer to as ADHD is a godforsaken lie. I don't care who is upset by that statement, who will stop reading me because I said it, or how many angry and disappointed Facebook comments are coming my way. ADHD is a fraud. One thing Matt does here, and did in
What?
both the 2015 article and the 2020 video I'm about to show you, was lay into critics who would say, you don't know anything about ADHD, you don't have a kid who has it. Something Matt takes very personally in this video, before basically admitting, like above, that he himself has exhibited several traits of an ADHD diagnosis.
So this, well, you can't talk about that topic unless you've been personally affected by it argument is one of the most cowardly forms of emotional blackmail. It's just a way of shutting down discussion. It's a way of a person trying to win an argument by claiming this emotional trump card. The assumption that people who have been personally affected by a certain thing must therefore be more knowledgeable about it and more credible when discussing it is obviously ridiculous. Just because you have car trouble doesn't make you a mechanic, right? And if it did, we wouldn't need mechanics. So just because you've been through something doesn't mean that your opinions about it, whatever it is, are necessarily more true or more grounded in facts than someone on the outside. Now, I'm not saying that your personal experiences are worthless. I'm not saying that. I think that they're valuable to the conversation. I think they can add color, they can add perspective, and so on. But they don't supersede facts, and they don't supersede logic, and they don't give you an exclusive right to have an opinion about a subject. Okay, that's my point. But as it happens, I do have experience. I've already shared several times my own personal struggles with getting through public school as a kid with this disorder. I was never diagnosed with the disorder officially because that was not a direction that my parents were going to go. They were not looking to medicalize my academic problems.
Oh my gosh, this is so sad. It's not just academic problems. It's noticeable in academic situations, especially when you're young, but now it's affecting your career too. It's affecting way more than just your academic performance, Matt. And you know what? Matt is a great example of why it's important to destigmatize the ADHD issue and talk about it and make sure people have a good understanding of what it is. Because I am willing to bet, and I think we're going to find out soon, that Matt is afraid of this thing because he doesn't like that it's technically a condition, that it's technically a mental illness. He doesn't like that. He wants it to just be this little thing that everyone's lying to him about, that he can just push his way through, man up, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and it's not going to work. And honestly, in a way, I feel bad for him. I especially feel bad for him because I lived my whole life with ADHD, and I know that my entire teen years were miserable, at least partially, because I had ADHD.
But I am familiar with ADHD. I have read the descriptions. I know what the symptoms are, and I see myself in pretty much every symptom described, then and now.
Listening to how he gets more passionate and louder as he continues talking about how he feels boys are treated unfairly in school, in a video where he also criticizes how boys are overdiagnosed with ADHD.
Nobody ever stops and thinks, now, hold on a second, why is it that if this is some neurological condition, why is it so much more common in boys? And why does it seem to only really be a problem in the public school setting?
What?
Why do we have so much ADHD coming out of the public school?
I mean, I was homeschooled and I had ADHD, so it was a problem for me when I was homeschooled. Also, again, we've been over this, but the reason boys have it more is simply because they're diagnosed more earlier on because they exhibit more symptoms.
And not very much of it coming out of homeschooling. Why is that? Nobody ever stops and asks these questions.
Because it is.
It's because we have taken boyhood.
I love this. He's like, nobody's ever asking these questions. We have asked these questions. We've also answered them, Matt. People can be homeschooled and still have ADHD. Usually it runs in families, dude.
We have taken boyhood and we have diseasified it and medicalized it, and we have slapped this medical label on it and called it ADHD. So it starts at a young age, and then it goes all the way into manhood and adulthood, and it just never ends. And we are destroying entire generations of men by telling them that there's something wrong with the fact that they are men.
But then his justification is just saying,
being men should not be unable to sit still, unable to focus, internal restlessness, quick to anger, low frustration tolerance. This should not be what it means to be a man.
It's biological and not questioning it.
My 5-year-old son fits the ADHD label by any measure, as many 5-year-old boys do, and that's the point. And that's not unusual, because boys are much more likely to have ADHD than girls, which is a fact that people who believe in ADHD as a medical diagnosis, they never really grapple with this fact. Why is it? Have you ever thought about why is it more common in boys? Isn't that a weird coincidence?
Listen to him. He never looked it up, and he just assumes that it's just gotta be that boys just have it more. How is he? He has got to be playing stupid.
Boys just so happen to be more rambunctious and energetic and more likely to run around and all that kind of stuff, and they also are more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. Isn't that a weird? Have you ever stopped to think about that? Doesn't that shake your faith in ADHD as a medical diagnosis a little bit? That it just so happens to be so much more common in the types of people who are predisposed anyway to be energetic and less focused?
And these impassioned arguments are often intertwined with his criticism of how kids are taught and, in his eyes, over-medicated. And while that is a more nuanced discussion than Matt wants to have, and it may mean that ADHD is overdiagnosed or some kids don't actually need medication, those cases, if they're true, shouldn't lead to Matt's blanket statement that ADHD, something he himself seems to exhibit and causes issues in his life, doesn't exist.
So his poor son, first of all, I mean, I have a kid, I have a 4-year-old daughter, and sometimes she exhibits signs that are like ADHD too, but I'm not going to like rush to get her medicated, but I'm also not going to just say, this isn't real. I'm going to just keep an eye on it, because he's right when he says that young kids, young toddlers might exhibit that kind of those symptoms, being really hyper, a lot of energetic, being or a lot of energy, being impulsive, hard to keep their focus. I'm not going to rush to like assume that my kid definitely has this condition or something, especially because nothing is really coming from it that's affecting her negatively or anything like that. But I'm also willing to, of course, keep an eye on it because I have it. So I would not be surprised if my kids later on start to exhibit symptoms. It's unfortunate. I wish that that wasn't the case. But this idea that like it's just fake, I feel really bad for that kid. Not even right now, but definitely for later on in his life. The fact that he is going to be around probably 12 and 13, having a really hard time focusing or getting things done. And you know what? Matt Walsh is going to be that dumb father that is screaming at his kid for being lazy, for not getting stuff done, for not getting it, for just not being dedicated enough, or he's going to call him stupid or something like this, which happens a lot, unfortunately. Matt is going to just be that person, which then only makes those kinds of learning disabilities far more challenging and more severe, because then you start to associate shame with it as well.
Matt draws parallels between how boys are treated in education, making claims that it's set up to benefit girls, that school is boring.
Society is set up in such a way to oppress women. Give me a break. They start their lives in the education system. The first 13, 14 years, their formative years, they are in an environment that is tailored to them. Boys are more rambunctious. They have more physical energy. They're less able to sit still, less able to focus attentively on one dull task for a prolonged period of time. This, again, is biology. The typical classroom environment is torture for a boy. It penalizes him for being himself. It penalizes him for being a boy. As a result, boys get lower grades. As a result, boys are more likely to drop out. As a result, boys are more likely to be suspended and expelled. Perhaps worst of all,
the entire school system is tailored to boys. So then, Matt, how come you were having challenges in school and now you're out of school and you're still having the same challenges, Matt? How come it's still affecting your career now and your relationship, Matt? Like, clearly it's not because of the school. It's just that in that environment happens to bring out ADHD symptoms more noticeably.
all boys are twice as likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. Why do we never question this? By high school, 20% of boys, 20% are diagnosed. 20%. Yet we never stop to ask ourselves why boys are more susceptible to this mysterious mental illness or disorder.
I tried to find Matt's sources. All I found were conspiracy health blogs that don't cite their evidence.
We never stop to consider that perhaps we are not so much diagnosing boys as we are diagnosing boyhood. See, if the school system were not predicated on sitting still and memorizing things, and it need not be, but it is, there would be no ADHD.
Like Matt's note about being in his head when we were discussing introversion, this bit serves as something as a Rosetta Stone to why Matt finds the idea of ADHD truly distasteful. I mean, by his logic, even if he's out of school, why would he have a problem with the diagnosis? Why would he have an issue as an adult using medication that might help him with basic tasks he might have issues with? Because to Matt, it seems like a weakness.
The point is, he could easily earn the label ADHD if we sought out that diagnosis. I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that my son could get that diagnosis. But we're not going to seek that diagnosis because the boy is not sick. He's not disordered. The boy is just a boy. He's more of a handful than some boys. He's less of a handful than other boys. He has his own personality. And I cannot imagine.
So that's what it is then. He's scared of it being labeled a disorder or a disability or a sickness. This is pathetic. And also, good point, chat. It does seem as though Matt is terrified of just anyone thinking that he's weak. But he calls himself a theocratic fascist. Fascists love strength. They need to give the appearance, the aesthetic of strength, no matter what. Even though that is weakness, because he is afraid of something, afraid of confronting this thing within himself. To him, he doesn't see it that way. He sees confessing that he has some kind of a disorder or a disability or something like that, that would then make him look weak, or maybe make him look bad if his son has this as well.
Treating it like the manifestation of a mental disease. Besides, like almost every kid with an actual ADHD diagnosis, he can learn, he can focus, he just doesn't always learn the things we want him to learn in the ways we want him to learn them.
So what are you going to do when you're at a job? What are you going to do when your boss says, here's how we do things around here, and you say, well, I like to learn different, you see? Then what? Like, at some point or another, you need to be able to conform to a degree to a structure and rules, and if your ADHD is to the point so unmanageable that you can't do that, that could be a problem. Again, it's probably not a problem for a 5-year-old child right now, but for you to act like we're just going to treat this like it's him being a boy, you're screwing your kid up, dude. You're setting him down a path towards failure.
If my son was in public school, I have no doubt that they would probably tell us he has a learning disability. But he doesn't. He learns all the time. He loves to learn. He just likes to learn in his own way and about topics that interest him.
Matt is being so literal here, it's painful. He knows how to learn. How can he have a learning disability, Herder? You know what they mean, dude. You have a hard time learning within a certain structure, adapting to certain structures, listening to rules and listening to the teacher and retaining information and remembering that and then applying it.
And he likes to learn in a way that's more hands-on. I mean, the very idea that we take 5, 6, 7-year-old boys and we put them down in a classroom and we say, you need to spend the next 7 hours doing busy work. And then when they struggle mightily to perform that task, we drug them. I mean, just
because it's not busy work. He has a complete disregard for the education system. He has absolutely no understanding at all.
That. Just stop and think about what we're doing. Who ever said that a 7-year-old boy is supposed to be able to do that? Did we ever stop to think that a kid like that just isn't supposed to be doing that? Now I know, well, but if he doesn't do that, we need him to do that because he needs to learn this very quickly so he can go to college and he can get a job at a 9 to 5 and it's a cubicle and, so we have his whole life planned out for him. We've got his life planned out for him. We know what the schedule needs to be. So you got to learn this now, then learn that, then do that. And we've got it all mapped out. Do we ever stop to think that our map is wrong? Do we ever stop to think that our map is self-serving?
But even if you think that, the problem is that this map is not just controlled by you. It's not just you and your isolated little family, Matt. It's all of society. He's being so two-dimensional. Excellent caption up here. That really is very spot on. This is so 2D.
We want them to act?
It starts to come together that he sees this diagnosis as something medically wrong, as a sickness, and not just a difference. It seems to go back to his obsession with definitions, where if someone has a mental disorder, they're sick and less than or weaker instead of just different. Like
he is stigmatizing it in his own head.
Like he wants people to respect introverts and treat them how they preferred to be treated because he simply sees that as a difference. When in reality, it's likely tied to his ADHD, an innate chemical imbalance in his brain, a difference he was born with. On that note, and with Matt's love of definitions in mind, look at some other times he's talked about mental illnesses.
And you really have to wonder, actually, where do the drug companies and the psychiatrists, where do they get their idea for what is normal? Because they're talking all the time about, well, that's abnormal, that's disordered. Okay, well, what is normal to you? What do you consider normal? What is normal behavior? What is a normal person? What are normal feelings and normal thoughts?
Actually, this is answered very easily. All you have to do is measure a person against Matt Walsh, and the less like Matt Walsh they are, the more normal of a human they are.